Welcome to Cinema on Cinema. I'm Tim Wild, and Josh just interrupted me. And Josh is apparently with us tonight, and we have the man in the iron
the Celestial Kingdom. And I'm Lance.
That's Lance. Okay.
Can't tell here. Let me help you.
Oh my goodness.
See?
Doesn't he look so uncomfortable? You should watch him at the Ren Fair trying to like blend in for like 2 hours and act really cool wearing his armor of football pads. But
Can you not see the performance?
Yeah. You're truly dedicated to our discussion tonight. We're doing a two or more witnesses discussion of Knives Out. I bought it proudly, and I shared it.
I testified that it is an actual movie.
Great.
There's two witnesses.
Great.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I have not received a sure witness that it is an actual movie.
So we're going to discuss. We're going to keep this really brief. But I know I have.
Yeah,
some,
right.
Yeah. So less
Unlike
than an
all the
hour.
other ones we've done.
I have some thoughts about the director, Rian Johnson. But
Wait, I thought you said we were keeping it brief.
We are. I just know.
Are you still mad about The Last Jedi? Is that
Yes.
what's going on here?
We're gonna pocket that for now. We're gonna put that on the side. Let's talk about the movie real quick, and then I have some beef to get off my chest. Beef?
Oh man. We already had a 3-hour conversation about this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into The Last Jedi unless Lance is gonna.
Oh, I am. I'm definitely bringing that crap up.
All right. So decide that for now. Okay, first of all, Josh, I think you seem like the most unenthused to watch it tonight. What did you think of it?
I mean, it was fine. Yeah, I think so. Everybody I've talked to about this movie has really, really liked it. So I had some high expectations going in. I like the cast. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. She was great in it, and really everybody was great in it.
I didn't even realize that's Jamie Lee Curtis. That is Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just been forever since I've seen her in a movie. I went from like True Lies to Knives Out.
Yeah,
You didn't watch all the Halloween movies?
Yeah, and then and Daniel Craig was great. It was interesting to have him in a movie where he's not using his British accent. So
his accent was awesome. That southern draw. Oh,
yeah,
so
he did a good job with that. So there were a lot of moving parts to the movie, and so overall, though, I mean, good murder mystery. Definitely better than what was that one on the train that they just did not too long ago?
The Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express, which had like a bunch of really great actors, and I was really excited to see it because of the cast, and then it kind of fell flat. So this one was a little bit better, but I think I had a little bit too high expectations going in, and so I wasn't like completely enthralled. Everybody who I had talked to who had seen it had no expectation going into it and didn't really know what it was, and then was really pleasantly surprised. So I was a victim of my own expectations. But a good movie, I would recommend it to anybody to see.
Did anybody to see it? Okay, Lance, I didn't see Orient Express. Did you see that and like it?
Nope, I haven't seen that.
Okay. Well then, Josh, your comparison is the only one you're going to get out of us.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me just say, Murder on the Orient Express is good. I would even say better visually. Like, it's a good visual movie. It's one to, because of the CGI around the train and all the places they're going and stuff. But the story kind of fell flat and had holes. So this one I felt like it was much more well thought out.
Story?
The story was much more well.
The story of Knives Out was better, well thought out, but the visuals for Orient Express were better, or this was better?
I think the visuals, I mean, I guess you can't really compare them because one's on a train and one's not, right? I mean,
Well, Knives Out wasn't a very visual movie.
Yeah, it's not designed to be a very visual movie. But yeah, I mean, so, I mean, I guess it's comparing apples to oranges. So
No, let me just give a little credit to the direction real quick, because the opening sequence where she's taken the maid taking the food up to her, she doesn't know where the body is, where it shows the expansive and ridiculousness of this house, and there's even a comment later on. I can't remember who says it, but they were talking about like he practically lived in the board game of Clue, like in the board. That was his house, and there's all these interesting shots, and not just straight shots, but interesting angles of the big rooms, the libraries, his books, his work, the weird stuff. And the one thing that drove me nuts, the freaking wheel of freaking knives that never was addressed in the whole movie. I was like, what is this freaking shrine that sits behind a random chair in one room? It's like, this is like the Game of Thrones. I couldn't figure out what this freaking thing was, and they never addressed it the whole movie. It was just there. It was crazy.
Well,
But,
it alluded to the name of the film.
Of course.
And the name of the film was about how, they all attacked
Knives
each
Out.
other.
He says
So-
you have your knives out and your beaks in blood or something. I wrote it down. It's a good line, and I hate when they give the line or the name of the movie. Beaks out. He says you're a pack of vultures at the feast, knives out and beaks bloody. Ooh, it's a good line. But I was like, okay, but what is this circle and shrines? Does it represent all those novels, we each knife or something? And it all plays out. But that wheel visually came out so strong at the end, and then the different scenes with the different conversations during the party, all that stuff, all of it was shot beautifully with the camera. So I just disagree that there wasn't anything interesting, and part of the storytelling was with the direction. I'm sorry, that's all. It was just
I never said there wasn't anything interesting. I would like to point out that Tim is on a cinematography kick. He's been on it for a year. I don't think he's complained about any movie, and he's talked about how visually amazing every movie is since he's been on this kick. So,
well, the more I learn about it and the more I can appreciate it, and I've been watching it, and I can go back with any movie I've seen, in the last 2 years since my film class. Even when I learned little concepts, I was like, oh, I can appreciate things now, and I could go make a top 7 shots list of almost every movie. I know what 7 I would pick from this one. I almost want to start doing that, but I love it. It's like someone's interested in photography, and I don't know anything about cinematography except for I can appreciate and understand different stuff with the angles. But this was just gorgeous. Even the opening shot with the dogs running across the lawn, which meant nothing. I was like, when you think about what this family is like and what those dogs were doing, coming and approaching the attacker who you didn't know who the attacker was, that was symbolic. Just everything. Anyway, that was the direction. I haven't seen Orient Express, but this isn't about Orient Express comparison.
Well, let me just say, you don't really need to see Midnight on the Orient, or the Murder on the Orient Express. It's
I've
fine.
heard good things about it. I want to see it. But anyway, doesn't
Well,
matter.
they're wrong, whoever they are. So
So you like this better. We messaged
did.
you saying, how's your movie going? You were like, I'm bored. Did you?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
so in the middle of it, I don't know. I mean, other than the movie Clue, these types of, or like Mission Impossible, these types of movies where there's like all this figuring out what's going on, like, you're not really clear what is going on. I don't know. It's not really my thing. But then at the end, when they really started wrapping everything together, I actually sat up in my seat.
It was exciting, huh?
Yeah, and I was like, oh man, this is getting good.
Right.
Like with all the plot twists at the end. So in the middle, I was like, this is boring. And I might not have been in the right frame of mind either. I was kind of tired. It was at the end of
You were watching it as an assignment for this video, I know.
Well, yeah, well, not just that also, but I was trying to wrap up some things at work when I started the movie, because I'm working from home right now. So I put it on while I was working. So for a little bit, I wasn't really paying attention. This is clearly a movie you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, as I was like halfway through it, and I know you had said you were gonna put it on while you were working. I'm like, how is Josh catching any of this stuff?
No, I'm sure I didn't catch like nearly any.
Well, I think that's what's the fun thing about this movie is it starts out as a traditional murder mystery, and in every murder mystery, like, they have these subtle hints of like, oh, it must be her, it must be him, or oh, it was, and that's what's cool about this is it puts a twist on that where it like actually tells you who did it, like halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
And then, oh, spoiler alert, and then like but it still is an interesting movie because it's not, it puts that twist on it where it's not about who did it, but how it all went down and what's going on.
Right.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that too. I did notice that. That was one thing. I think that's when I really started perking up, when it was like, all right, so we know who the killer is.
So that was another
and I knew,
movie. What's going on?
yeah, and I was like, well, they wouldn't just tell us who did it this early in the movie. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like there had to be something more.
Yeah, so
to
I had to. You're like, it's got to be wrong. They're trying to throw us off the path of the real killer, right? But
Right, but then at the end, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, but there's just all this extra stuff, right? You know, like
That's what I thought, was because they get up to the point, if you didn't catch it, we're gonna spoil this whole thing, but they get to the point, like almost to the halfway mark, where before she gets really into her story, where she tells a story about the where you learn about the medication stuff and what really happened that night in her testimony. Then she leaves, and then she comes back and then has a conversation. He kicks her out, says, no, you've got to do this or whatever. But I kept thinking the real murder, like the knife part, was different. I thought he was going to lay down and die. She was gone, but like someone else actually did kill him. But then it turns into the second plot, where it's all about how everyone's reacting after the will reading, especially. Like everything just got heated up emotionally with everyone. You're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? What is she going to do? Which was all the family cared about. But you were also trying to figure out what Daniel Craig's, was his name, Blanc or whatever?
yeah,
But he was onto something. You're like, what is he doing this whole movie? Because you couldn't figure it out. And
right.
and that's structurally, it was talking about a traditional movie or a mystery movie, like we mentioned Clue. In Clue, you watch the opening half or first third or whatever, here's the details, here's the party, here's all the characters, here's who they are, what they're doing, their interactions, and the pieces of the puzzle, and then there's the death. And then the rest of it is talking and interviewing, interrogating, and suspects and finding clues and piecing it together, and then you have the conclusion.
by suspects, he means suspects.
Yes, no, your suspects, your suspicions. But in this one, I loved how in the opening interrogation scenes that they established that this wasn't the primary interrogation, this was like a follow-up interrogation because now Blanc is there. And they're telling this story, and they're telling the audience non-linearly. We're not watching the scene of the party, we're hearing different pieces of it, and then later on from the next testimony we hear other pieces of it, and then we hear like who's in the next room, you hear what their observation was, and that gives the audience very creatively the whole story up into 2/3 of it before it goes off the rails. But I loved how they did that, and I loved how in the interrogations, here's this character, here's their part, next character, their part, and then like, okay, then what happened that night? And they all start telling the same parts of the story, but it cuts to each character's version. You know what I mean? I just thought that was really interesting to watch, and it kept me paying attention, because we all know I suck with plot. I can appreciate cinematography, but I can't follow the most basic story worth crap. And this one, I was like, I watched 20 minutes. I had to start the movie over with a notepad. I'm not kidding. And I had to make a family tree so I could follow who these freaking characters were, because I wasn't getting it. Once I did.
And that was the other thing that was hilarious about this movie was, they introduced the one brother played by Captain America, and
Chris Evans. Ransom's his name.
And at first you're like, is he like the good guy? Because he comes off as a good guy, right? He comes off as the guy that's like, I'm staying out of all this family crap. And you always have, like, that's me in the family. I'm the guy that like doesn't put up with the drama, and I just like make fun of it all the time, and then I like edge out or whatever. Well, so that's what you think about, and every family has that person, right, that just goes in and tries to stir the pot and is like aloof from it all, and then bows out. But in the end, he's the worst of them all. Like, he's the worst knives out guy. And if you've ever been part of a funeral, like, it's funny how accurate, like, I mean, it's a little cartoony the way they portrayed him, but it's pretty accurate. Like, people go crazy over like stupid stuff, and like, and when you're dealing with that amount of money and riches and stuff, I can imagine maybe it does get that cartoony and crazy, and the knives really do come out when there's a funeral involved. And
it doesn't even have to be that amount of money. It's like any amount of money, and then people just go crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's serious.
It's a stupid petty thing, you know.
Yeah, but no, you know, I think that was also, so I really liked the movie Clue. Like, it's a great movie. And at the beginning of the movie, it had a lot of kind of similar remnants of Clue, you know, because it's like.
And I think that was intentional. I think that's why they dropped the name Clue in the script. You're like, we get it. This is.
Yeah. So, you know, I think I started getting bored with, because it was kind of predictable at the beginning, right? Okay, so they're interviewing all the players. All of the players have some motive to want to kill them. They all had some beef with the guy who got murdered. And so I was like, okay, so this is what this is about, right? It's a whodunit story. But then as soon as it's like, oh, we figured out, you know, whodunit, everyone just happens to be a train wreck, then it kind of like, you know, then it kind of got a little more interesting. And I think Chris Evans, I don't know if I'd say he showed a lot of range per se, but I mean, I loved how his character had a lot of different things in it. Like, you know, at one point he's like a complete mess. Everyone thinks he's a mess and a trust baby. Then he turns into kind of what you think is a good guy. Then it turns out he's a bad guy. You know,
and then a killer, like a violent killer.
Yeah, like exactly. And so that was all interesting. And I also love that for some reason she can't tell a lie without throwing up. And they never really explained where that comes from or how. It just happens.
See, and by the time at the end of the movie when she throws up all over him, which is, by the way, the best movie throw up I've ever seen in my life, I can say that.
Was there like Fruit Loops in there? It's
like, I don't know, but I don't want to describe it. But I was like, what just happened? And it like took me a second to figure out why she threw up. And and they delay that. They stall on that for a minute to hang you there. So you're like, oh, she didn't die on the phone. You're trying to figure out what the lie was. And so I love that. It was an interesting kind of lie detector test, the little the polygraph test that Daniel Craig could have walking her all over the place. Because that scene out on the balcony did the same team. She kept getting ready to throw up and didn't throw up, and then get ready to throw up and then didn't throw up as she was telling her story. And then you hear the clues where the guy what's his name that died, Thermally or whatever, he told her, you have to tell the truth, and this is exactly what you say. Tell it in this order, these details, and that way you won't give it away. I love that. That scene with her and him when the actual crime happened, not crime, but the death, I thought that was just amazing. It was well directed, well written, and like you were just hooked. Like you were trying, like what is happening, and his composure while she's freaking out, the acting there was just amazing. Except here's the problem with that scene. I didn't like this. Maybe they address it, but I didn't notice. He's sitting there writing down notes while he's dying, and she's trying to find the drug that'll heal him or take care of him. He's writing down this idea for how to kill someone for a future murder or for a book, and he's like writing it down. But that piece of paper is critical evidence on something that they'd be investigating later on. She doesn't tear it up. He doesn't do anything with it that we see. Like when they come into the crime scene, that piece of paper would have been pretty obvious right there on the front, on the table that they were playing the game. I thought about that after the movie was over. I was like, wait, he kind of gave it away that they could, check for that. They were already doing the talk screening and everything, but I don't know. I thought that was kind of a big part. That was a big deal. That was a hole in the donut hole of the donut hole of the donut hole.
Wasn't he writing like his will or something? No. I didn't get that he was writing a book out of that. I don't remember.
He was like, this is an interesting way to kill someone. He was like getting 10 minutes after they die. If you don't do it, and the ambulance will get there for 15 minutes. He was like giving all the details of what was happening. He was writing it down for future notes for a book.
So I have two thoughts. Well, one thought and a question. So the thought is, I agree with you on when she threw up, because I remember when she threw up at the time, I was like, she threw up. Oh man, maybe she actually was somehow the one who actually killed him or whatever. Like I didn't understand why she threw up, and then when she mentioned, she wasn't on the phone or whatever it was, I was like, oh, that was the lie. That makes sense. So I think that was well played.
Well done.
My question was at the very end, and I guess maybe I missed something, but at the very end, Jamie Lee Curtis picks up that note and like, what is that? I couldn't I didn't understand.
This was interesting to me because I watched the last half hour, the unraveling part again, and then while I was getting set up, I just started the movie over to hear the interrogation part in the beginning. She says in the beginning of the movie when she's talking about her dad and the police or the investigators, like when she's talking to her husband, I guess all our kids look up to their dad or whatever. He's like, I don't know, but she's talking about her dad, and he said or Jamie Lee Curtis goes, you have to have, or my dad and I had a secret way of communicating with each other. And she said that was part of his game. And if you wanted his affection or whatever, you have to play his game. So that was something secret between them. No one would have remembered that by the end of the movie, because this is what was cool about Richard, as the husband. Richard sneaks back into the study at one point when they're all kind of maneuvering out of the room.
Which one's Richard?
The husband, the cheating husband. He knew about the letter because in his flashback, he says, I wrote it all down for her and I'm going to give it to her. And he like hides it.
That's right. There was nothing on the letter when he opened it up.
He sneaks in, opens it. There's nothing on there. He's like, oh, he bluffed me. He just leaves it on the table. Here's the thing. If he had not done that and tried to steal it, there's no way Jamie Lee Curtis would have ever known about it, because the house would have been given to the girl. The girl also didn't know about the secret letter. She would have just thrown it out with the rest of any stuff that when she was cleaning up. No one would have ever known if he hadn't picked open the drawer, pulled it out and looked at it, and then left it right there. So Jamie Lee Curtis at the end of the movie comes in with the baseball, sets it down, sees the letter, and gets the stuff, and he reads it. And it had her initial on it. Like that was their secret paper too. Mm-hmm. As I thought about it, I was like, oh, he screwed himself. I mean, he screwed the girl. That's why he was in trouble. But I love that. I love that.
Now that all makes sense. I didn't. Yeah, for some reason I just
never would have caught that. Yeah. If I hadn't just watched it twice, most of those two things part. Yeah, I like that. I also like at the end shot where Chris Evans gets thrown in the police car and it pans back, and you see each character maneuver into frame, and they're all turning around looking up at her, and and it shows this side shot where you have her at a excuse me, in an elevated position on the balcony looking down on them, which is like the switch in the status between them, because the whole movie there's this whole little thing about the servant. So she was a servant and she was kind of welcomed into the family, and you notice how they have that little subtle disrespect that every one of them said a different country that her family was from.
Yeah, like that whole theme in the movie was hilarious to me.
Right.
This is a perfect Mormon movie, and I'll tell you why. Because you get like the same thing in church where everybody's like all nice to each other, and then the moment there's like an issue, everyone's like, so they're like, oh, we're not racist, we're so lit, like, and they talk about, they have that conversation around the dinner table where they're all like, oh, you can't call her that, and you can't say that, and I think they talk about immigration and other things, and then everybody's nice.
Thing,
and even the daughter like loves the maid, right? They have that nice relationship with each other. Yeah, but as soon as like she can't go to her private school anymore or whatever because there's not enough money, she's like all about using whatever manipulation she can use to get the money from the maid, and they all just betray her, and they're all like knives out, like it said.
Yeah, that's why in his rant at the end, he's like, you guys were all terrible to her, and he's like, and she didn't do it. I'm going to tell the police that it should go down as a suicide, and then he gets her out of there. He says the case is closed, and that was his whole speech, like, you guys were awful. And at the end, she kept saying, or she was like trying to decide, she's like, oh, this family. She's like, do I help them? And then he's like, well, I have my opinions about it, but that's up to you. But I kind of know you're going to do something good. And that's why
I think that was what was so, that I liked that part. And the reason I liked that part was because he is basically telling her, you are a better person than I am. So I'm not going to recommend to you what you should do because you're going to do the right thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I took it anyway. Because he just got through telling her, like, you're a great nurse and you're a good person, right? And so then he's leaving, and then he's like, I got the same thing when she's like, should I help him? He's like, I got my opinion, but you're a better person than I am, so I'm going to let you do it. You do whatever you want to do.
So I want to talk about that. That's the theme, okay? This movie, this is going to blend into how I feel about Rian Johnson. This entire movie has a...
Here we go.
Here we go. Everybody, okay, get your popcorn out. You're going to be here for a minute.
Okay. The message of this movie was that, and he says to her, you played his game, or you won at his game, but you didn't do it by playing by his rules, but your own, or whatever. There was something like I've written down, but he said you played his rule, or you didn't play by his rules, you played it your way, and that's how you won. And she said, you're a good person. He told her earlier that he defeated Chris Evans in his little plot that the cops would show up and arrest her there at the scene with when Fran died, after he murdered Fran. He said she beat you because she was a good person, and she tried to heal or to revive him. Her being a good person reviving him thwarted Chris Evans' plan, and her being a good person in the end unraveled how she was not the killer, and how Chris Evans and everyone else, all their things around her, the storm around her, she's the one thing that stood out. Now at the very end, when Chris Evans tried to kill her, when he says, whatever, in for a penny, in for a pound, whatever, he grabs the knife and tries to come in. And by the way, this is an example of a setup and payoff, because way earlier in the movie, he had a conversation with the old man and her, where he was saying that he wouldn't know a real knife from a prop knife, because he was talking about how he's such an idiot. And also the conversation about she can beat the old man at the game, whatever it was, more times than he could. It shows that she's always better. So he grabs a knife trying to come in and kill her, and he couldn't do it because that was a symbol of him failing to defeat her, as it's been laid out the entire movie. Okay, a lot of setup in this movie. The point is, all of the characters the good characters were easy to like, the bad characters were easy to not like. They all had their little quirks and their personalities and their parts in the story, and all of it wove together to make a good, interesting story that told a positive point to it, where you had this girl who is overall good. And I thought she was going to die because Rian Johnson is the master troll, and he wanted to just, just freak out and thwart our expectations.
Hold on. How do you get Rian Johnson as a master troll? I think the only reason the only reason you say that is because of Star Wars. If you put Star Wars out of the equation, I don't think you would ever have said that.
Let me finish my thought. But that's what I'm saying, because I know how he is with the audience, and it's not just from Star Wars, but as I know how he is with the audience.
How is he a troll in other movies?
Finish. Well, there's other stories, other things he's right. We'll come back to it. But when he tries to kill her, I was like, that's going to be the twist, because he has to have a twist and leave you disappointed and dissatisfied. But no, she came out on top at the balcony looking down at this horrible family, and the clouds settled, whatever. And at the end, there's our hero in an elevated position that went through this incredible journey to get there because the good in her endured. Now, you take that concept and that wonderful storytelling with a lot of elements that work together, beautifully shot with a good message, and including a lot of subverted expectations throughout the movie. This beautifully done movie made me so mad at what he did with Star Wars, because I'm sorry, we just barely learned who this character was.
I don't think he's sorry.
I'm not. I don't apologize. But we don't, we love this character. We're so happy to see her end where she was. But he took Luke Skywalker and threw him in the dirt and just trolled the audience and just made everyone, all the expectations and theories and concepts that we were intrigued about from the previous movie. And he just threw mud at it and just trashed it because...
hold on. Did Rian Johnson write this movie?
Yes.
Was he one of the
screenwriters? He wrote it. It wasn't co-wrote. Yeah. And there may be some ghostwriters with him, but it was he wrote it. So he wrote and directed this with a wonderfully told story with a good positive message, but he takes Star Wars, a movie literally about hope, a series about hope, and the main character Skywalker, and he trashes it and then kills the hero at the end for absolutely no purpose. It just infuriated me thinking more about how competent and wonderfully careful.
Luke Skywalker died exactly the same way as Obi-Wan Kenobi, so I don't know if you could give it that much credit.
Story-wise, his death in there was not necessary.
What I think is hilarious is how tight of a plot that this Rian Johnson movie has, and how lack of that, you know, the latest Star Wars by J.J. Abrams, who usually has the tight plots. His plot was all over the place. I mean, I don't hate the last movie of Star Wars like other people do, but you got to admit that plot was all a little loosey-goosey. It was not a tight plot.
Well, Lance, if you don't hate every Star Wars other than Episode 4 and 5, then you're not a true Star Wars fan. I mean, that's how it works.
And I'm fine with that.
I'm
fine with not being a true Star Wars
fan. That anyone's ever done since Empire Strikes Back. So, but no, I think that I think what we're really learning here is the depths of Tim's anger about what happened to Luke Skywalker.
It's not just
the
that.
Last Jedi.
Okay, let's.
I will give Tim this. I do think that Rian Johnson did troll a little bit. However, I think it was well deserved because Star Wars fans have become toxic, and I think that's what he was trolling against. And good for him, man. That's what I say. And also, you know, it is poetic justice that everyone's like, oh, J.J. Abrams is gonna save the movie, and he does, like, according to the Star Wars fanboys, like, does a terrible job, and then Rian Johnson comes out with a movie at the same time that's just like taking the box office by storm. Like, there's poetic justice.
You're wrong.
Man.
The fanboys are the ones that like the Rise of Skywalker because it catered to all their little fan niches that they wanted. Like, that's, I mean,
I have not met one Star Wars fanboy that liked the Rian Johnson film.
I've met a few that everyone I've talked to said, well, it wasn't perfect, but it was a good ending. That's kind of how I've heard most people talk about it. But I think it's a valid point about Star Wars fans being toxic. I wouldn't say they're toxic per se, but I think they're overly critical, like big time, of these movies.
Oh, they're crazy
toxic.
I agree.
And I feel like I can say that because that's the way wrestling fans are. Like, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, and wrestling fans are like that too. They just crap on everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be like the greatest WrestleMania ever, 100,000 people in there, and they're going to come out and be like, hated it. You know what I mean? Like, they're just going to hate on it, you know? And that's just what they do. And so, you know, I mean, and the reason that is, it's the same reason for Star Wars fans as it is for wrestling fans. Wrestling fans, when they have visions of certain things happening, and they have visions of like The Rock wrestling John Cena or Stone Cold and Goldberg or something, they have a vision of what it's supposed to be like. And because if it doesn't fit that vision exactly, they hate it, right? And I think that is the way that Star Wars fans have been with episodes 7, 8, and 9. Not so much 7. Everyone seemed to really
I was about to say that's not at all what happened with 7.
Well, and 7 didn't take a lot of risks, though.
No.
Yeah, but and also, I mean, I don't know. 7, I thought, like, was actually probably the most hope anyone had since the original 3. But I mean,
right, going from the prequels to 7, I mean, like.
Well, yeah, and also not only that, but like then, I mean, you don't really have Luke Skywalker in there, you know, or anything like that in episode 7, and he comes out, and then they don't do exactly what they want with the beloved Luke Skywalker.
It's not that you don't do exactly what you want. You freaking literally destroy everything that was Luke Skywalker.
No, I disagree. I think if you take the plot line of the Rian Johnson movie and you don't watch the movie, all you do is see the basic plot line, I don't think people would have a problem with it. I think the execution was Rian Johnson's problem in that movie
of The Last Jedi,
and in this movie, Knives Out, Rian Johnson's execution was excellent. It was really good.
Here's the difference. Knives Out
was a different kind of people. Like, the people that watch Star Wars don't want deep, dramatic, like, character exploration.
Nothing in The Last Jedi tied together, went anywhere, didn't have like a big open.
That's not true.
What did? Name one thing.
That's not
The
true.
casino world, Tim. The casino world is perfect.
You mean the half hour we derailed from the main plot to go to our fourth B plot to come back, which had absolutely
Luke Skywalker's character arc was
not talking about his ending. Let's say he lived at the end. That exact same movie, everything was off the rails and didn't make sense and didn't tie together. None of it did like this did. This was a
No, that's not
perfectly
true.
done character story where you had a lot of different pieces.
I think that Rian Johnson wanted to explore a character in a way that a lot of people didn't think that he would go. I mean,
Luke?
some people thought Luke would go dark side, so that would be an obvious exploration of the
Luke
character.
was in a half
But
hour.
what Rian Johnson wanted was to say, hey, what if Luke felt guilty about killing or attempting to murder one of his students because he thought it was the right thing to do? And so that was a character exploration that Rian Johnson wanted to do that just didn't sit well with the fans. And maybe the execution wasn't as great as it could have been. And I think that Rian Johnson did the same thing in this movie. He explored the character of that lady and these different people and their hate and it was executed a lot better and it worked out a lot better.
Again, if Luke was barely a half hour or 40 minutes of that 2.5 hour long movie, he wasn't the only functioning or thing that the piece of it didn't work. Everything else going on in the main plot of that movie wasn't working. I had no problem with the whole thing with Luke being weakened and feeling guilty and being secluded on the island, all that stuff, except there's a point when he goes and sees his sister on R2-D2 that he's like, okay, I need to snap out of this because that's his family, that's his responsibility. He's the one that created Kylo Ren. He's the one that failed everyone. Luke Skywalker, as we know, Luke Skywalker from 3 big movies where he was the main character, from 30 years of fandom and following this character, even Mark Hamill himself saying, I don't agree with the fundamental choices he's making with this character. All of that adds up to Rian Johnson saying, no, we're just going to still leave him on the island and make him a jerk. Just to die at the end. Oh, but he used the Force so powerfully, he was a martyr. That doesn't make up for the rest of the movie. So much was going on in the movie that didn't connect.
I just want to point out that this is an episode about Knives Out and not
That's my point.
not the
That's
last.
Yeah,
Jedi.
I tried to tie it in.
Yeah, but
tie it in.
I get only Tim could take a nice review about a good movie and turn it into how much he hates a Star Wars movie.
Because
But
this movie just elevates how capable and competent and visually great and creative and how tight he can be with a script. He can take characters that we don't know anything about and make us just so invested, and I cared about the characters by the end of it. And it was so enjoyable watching their rise and fall that he knows how to do that. But he just spat in the faces of all the Star Wars fans that entrusted.
No, I don't think that's what happened. I think that Rian Johnson had a lot of leeway on Knives Out. He had control over the movie.
It's his own thing.
He had creative control. When you do a Disney movie, you can say goodbye, especially in the modern day. Maybe it was different back in the day, but if you do a Disney movie nowadays, you can say goodbye to your creative control. I don't care what anybody
more
says.
interviews with him last.
I've seen lots and lots of signs of that throughout all the newer Star Wars movies. I've heard the guy in Comic-Con talk about the script to Solo and how much control Disney exerted over him. Yeah. Only he could only hint at it because heaven forbid that he revealed Disney's control. Plus, Star Wars is such a story that has everyone says, oh, Rian Johnson had free reign to do whatever he want. I don't believe it for a second. And I think that this movie is another good indication that that's true. He did have complete control over this movie, and he did a really good job of it, and it was really tight. It was a really tight script, and
gotta watch more.
They were his own characters.
Kathleen Kennedy's interviews also imply how much.
Oh yeah, she's totally gonna tell the truth.
Rian Johnson.
Kathleen Kennedy is one of the people that has the most control.
Yeah.
And is one of the biggest control freaks over those movies.
Yeah, they all entrusted him. He gave them the script. They said, well, if this is what he really wants to do, I guess we'll do it.
Yeah, I don't believe it for a second.
Okay.
So anyway, back to Knives Out. I think what we're really saying here is that Knives Out is a good movie.
I love it.
And you should see it. I wouldn't go so far as say I loved it. And what I mean by that is, would I watch it again? Yeah, I probably would, just because this is the type of movie.
You need to.
Yeah, you kind of need to, so you catch everything. I felt the same way about Mission Impossible. The first Mission Impossible that came out. Like, you have to watch it again with knowing who the who the murderer is, so that way you can catch everything and you see little things. I bet the second time through, I bet it's a lot more fun to watch.
It was a very for a murder mystery. It was a very like enjoyable comedic movie. Like it had a lot of good like funny moments, and it was in multiple ways in the plot, in some of the like social justice things that they put in there, but also just like the actors did such a good job that it was funny just to see them acting the parts.
Right. Marta was so incredibly likable. Like.
That's my point.
Really,
good.
She was so likable, and
that was all the rest of them, and her performance, and
the rest of them were so. I hated all of them.
See,
all so bad.
Exactly what I'm saying.
But they were pretty accurate too.
That's
how
so
people
funny,
are.
It just I watched it and it was just exhausting. It's like, oh my gosh, how could anyone pause? No wonder he wrote you all out of the will. You're all a mess.
And and you weren't really catching that until Craig says that at the very end. He's like, you guys were awful. There, you're like, whoa, where'd this come from?
And I have to put this in though. I have to put it. This movie is actually a movie about Tolkien estates and Lord of the Rings. I just gotta throw that out there. It really is. Like, I think J.R. Tolkien, if he could come back in time and see what Tolkien Estates has done to like his works and how they've made it into like this huge money-making scheme and sued everybody for like using dwarves and elves and blah blah blah, like, yeah, just gotta throw that out there. That's what I thought when I saw this movie. I was like, this is a movie about J.R. Tolkien.
Where he had the one son that wanted to take it to Netflix and stuff. He was like, no, that's not how my work was supposed to be done the whole time.
Well, I think this movie is really more about Rocky, since we're all talking about favorite movies. And let me just tell you, it's like Rocky because Rocky got rich and then he lost all his money, and then that's the extent of what I can come up with. But we love, but I love Rocky, and so I wanted to bring it up since everybody else is bringing it up.
Well, it reminded me of Superman Returns, where Lex Luthor seduces the old rich lady, and he gets her on her deathbed to write the will out to him, and he screws over the entire family waiting outside, pounding on the door, and he walks out and throws the wig on the case, says, "You can keep that. The rest is mine," and he runs off. So it's just like.
Well, mostly it's a movie about Star Wars: The Last Jedi, though. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, we can all agree that this is all about Rian Johnson and how badly he screwed up Last Jedi.
That's right. That's exactly. This was like, hey, look what I could have done. Now, I'll say this, too. And I said this before. When they announced that Rian Johnson was going to have his own trilogy, having seen Looper, having seen The Last Jedi, and now having seen this, I've always said I would love watching him do something with his own characters, his own story, and his own free range. I didn't like him screwing around with the characters he was interested in. We're not going to talk about that anymore, but I'm saying I would love to watch him do
when you say
story.
When you say he's getting his own trilogy, you mean like a completely different movie, or like a spin-off of Star Wars?
In the air. It's never. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But yeah, this was announced right after Last Jedi came out. And I'll say this, and I said the whole time, I think visually, Star Wars: The Last Jedi was the best looking Star Wars movie of all time. I still feel that way. It's so good. Even better than the new one. But I think the CGI stuff was amazing. The direction, the visuals, the music. Oh, it's just all.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Did Tim just say something nice about The Last Jedi?
I said this.
Yeah, but it's only to justify all the bad things he said.
Yeah, that's right. He has to come up with something so he doesn't seem completely
My
unfair.
review with that exact phrase is still on record on Facebook somewhere. But anyway.
Well, I think it would be good to see a Star Wars trilogy that he wrote, because maybe Disney has. I think Disney has. They've learned their lesson that they can't overproduce Star Wars or no one will like it. So
I disagree.
Maybe it will be. I think they learned that with Mandalorian. Mandalorian, they started being like, okay, we'll let people do things differently. And
because you had a writer and creator, Jon Favreau, who was a passionate fan who cared about the characters and the lore. You didn't have him trying to be like, I'm going to see what I can do to piss them all off because they like The Last Jedi. Anyway,
that is one thing I really like, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. It has nothing to do with Knives Out at all. But I really like how these movies that are coming back are now being kind of written and directed by fans, like people who grew up, our age, people who grew up with it like us. Cobra Kai was like that. You know, you just mentioned I can't remember what you just mentioned, but
Mandalorian.
Yeah, the Mandalorian was like that. You know, we hope that Bill and Ted, the next Bill and Ted, will be like that, even though it's the same director from the original movie. But I mean,
Coming to America, Eddie Murphy said he's
Coming to
very
America
pleased with that.
well, that's really exciting because I love Coming to America. That was so funny and so ahead of its time. Like I love that movie. Oh gosh, can't wait for it Coming to America too. That's an R-rated movie that I might have to see. So, but is Arsenio Hall going to be in that one?
Yeah, pretty much everyone came back, he said.
That's fantastic.
Well, what this movie really
None of
was
it's
about
anywhere
was
else.
Knives Out against Rian Johnson.
No, that was The Last Jedi. Was lightsabers out against Rian Johnson. Anyway, other than the throne of blades not making any sense and the one big piece of evidence being left in the room, I feel is a pretty solid movie. I just rated it just now. I gave it a 9 out of 10. The only thing I dropped it was music, just 1 out of 2 because I just didn't. It was fine. It fit the beat. I wasn't overwhelmed with anything.
So I liked it. I think I would drop it a little bit though. I'd say a 7.5, and here's why. Okay?
7.5.
Yeah, here's why. One, because I don't have a very stringent number like you do, your scoring system. But the other reason is because I feel like this is a movie that no one would ever say is one of their favorite movies, but it's one that everyone's gonna like.
That's not a failure of the movie.
I'm not saying it's a failure. I'm just saying like a
But
9 out of
it
10.
can't not be a 10 just because it's not be everyone's favorite. I have a lot of.
I'm just saying a 9 out of 10 would tell me that there are going to be some people who are like, that is one of my favorite movies of all time.
I
Yes,
think there were some people that said this is one of the best movies they saw last year. Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's not saying much.
Yeah,
There
I
were
don't
some
know.
real stinkers last year.
I think 5 years from now, right, when people are talking about like the best movies they've seen in a long time, I don't think anyone's going to remember Knives Out as one.
Well,
of them.
that's not the way my rating system. I don't rate a movie based on long.
Well, we all know that you're wrong about everything anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But
all right. So 7.5.
I also don't like Tim's rating system.
No one likes it. I don't care. It's fine. I was just saying I ranked it pretty high. The only other thing, I don't know. Yeah, 9, maybe 8.5, but 9 out of 10. It was pretty solid. I couldn't think of much that I didn't like about it, visual or as far as all the aspects of it. I think everything was really well done.
It is a very good movie. I think that it's one that see, I don't know if this is one that I would necessarily say you should go and buy. It's one that you rent, it's one that you watch on TV. I don't know if it's one that you keep in your collection unless you're a serious collector like we are. You know what I mean?
I'm proud to buy it. I'm proud to have it in my collection. See, and that's the thing. I don't think I'll ever sit down and watch this again.
That's what I'm saying, right?
I agree. I agree with that. I might watch it like 10 years from now. It's not like going to be an annual watch or anything. But I started, now that everything's digital, I started buying movies that I want to have either as a piece of art, kind of like, and this is one I would buy for the art of it because as a cinematic masterpiece, I think it is. It's worth me purchasing. It's not one I'm going to be watching recreationally.
Right.
I may watch it again. Not my favorite shots.
That's what I'm saying.
Wait.
This is a movie that you're gonna like. If you're at home on a Sunday and you're tired and you just want to sit down and watch a movie, this is not one that you're gonna put in to watch.
No.
Or it's on, someone else is watching it. You'll sit down next to them and watch it. And be
I
like,
will.
yeah, this was funny.
Ooh, I like this part. I might sit down and watch it.
Yeah. This is one
Like
also.
about
If
20
you were
minutes.
flipping through channels, on the TV and it was on, you would stop and you'd watch something.
I might. Yeah.
But it's not one that like you're specifically going to look at your video rack or your DVD rack and be like, oh, Knives Out. I haven't seen this in a while.
It's never going to
You know
happen.
what I mean? It's not going to be one of those.
And if I was channel surfing and it landed on the part right after the will that you got bored, I would not stop to watch that next 20
Right.
minutes.
I think this movie, if someone asked, hey, what's one of the better murder mystery movies?
Oh,
this
yeah.
would be a movie I'd be like, oh, have you seen Knives Out? Knives Out is really good.
For
That's
sure.
That's a good point. Yeah. Behind Clue.
Behind Clue. Because
I don't
Clue
know.
is a perfect script.
I don't know about that. It's
Yeah,
been a
it's
long time since I've seen Clue,
You need to
so
read
I can't remember it very well. But
Oh,
Yeah.
pretty good.
and this isn't, again, like you said, it's a movie where people are like, hey, is this a good movie? Should I watch it? I think most people would say yes. No one would be like, oh, it's only for a certain type of people, or
Now, if
this
you're
is
a
a
murder
movie
mystery lover, and there's a lot, that is a genre. If you love murder mystery movies, this could be one of your favorite ones.
because it's unique. It's unique from other murder mysteries.
And this would be a good movie, I feel like, if you're in like a group setting, like you're having a group movie night, this would be a
Right.
good one because you could talk about it. You know what I mean? Like afterwards, you could really, there's a lot
Especially
to
if
talk
they
about.
hadn't seen it before. Like a lot
Right.
of
If you hadn't seen it before and you were all, coming together to watch a new movie, this would be a good
Oh,
one.
and also, this would be an excellent movie to ruin if you wanted to troll people. Just like
Yes.
tell them what happens in the very beginning.
Yeah. This would be one you could really annoy people by sitting there, and then when something's about to happen, be like, watch this. Be one of those people too. Yeah.
All right, Knives Out. Any final thoughts? It's just great. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I personally love Rian Johnson and everything he's done in any movie.
Especially The Last Jedi.
Exactly.
He is a jerk of a Star Wars fan, but he is a brilliant writer and director.
I'll tell you, last thing, and then I'll be quiet. I'll tell you, like, I'm not a huge Brian Johnson fan. Like, I didn't love The Last Jedi, but I don't love Star Wars that much in general. But I didn't like Looper at all. So this movie was sort of a surprise to me. I was like, wow, that was really tight. That was a really good movie. He did a good job.
I like Looper up until the ending, but that's a whole other discussion because I had a better ending than he did. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks, Lord Helmet, for joining us, and thanks, Josh, for coming down from the Celestial Kingdom to enjoy our discussion on Knives Out. Get it, watch it, or rent it, or wait for it to be on Netflix. I don't care. Do what you're going to do. It was very enjoyable. Well done. But that's all. So thanks for watching Saints on Cinema. This cinema, the Knives Out cinema. We'll catch you next time. Okay, bye.
Is that your ending, Tim? Or were you going to say something else?
Nope. That's it.